Imagine a high-security room inside Dublin Castle, the stronghold of British power in Ireland during the early 20th century. The room holds treasures of immense value, including the Irish crown jewels, dazzling ornaments encrusted with emeralds, rubies, and diamonds. They were symbols of imperial power, a connection between Britain and Ireland through the Order of St. Patrick. Yet one day these priceless treasures vanished without a trace. Now, over 100 years later, the jewels are still missing, and the case remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in history. How could such valuable artifacts disappear from a fortress guarded by some of the best security of its time? And why has no one ever been brought to justice? Today, we're diving deep into this mystery, not just to understand what happened, but to explore how this unsolved case reflects deeper truths about power, loyalty, and the human desire for answers. The story begins on July 6, 1907, when Sir Arthur Vickers, the custodian of the jewels and Ulster King of Arms, discovered the theft. The jewels, last seen on June 11th, had been kept in a locked strongbox inside his office at Dublin Castle. The strongbox showed no signs of forced entry, meaning whoever stole the jewels had access to a key or had a way to copy one. The jewels weren't simply decorative, they were ceremonial regalia of the Order of St. Patrick, an elite British order of chivalry. For them to go missing from Dublin Castle, the heart of British authority in Ireland, was a profound humiliation. Think about this. How often do we assume that symbols of power are invulnerable, only to be reminded that even the most secure institutions have vulnerabilities?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
From the beginning, the investigation was riddled with challenges. Vickers, as the custodian of the jewels, came under immediate suspicion, not necessarily of theft, but of negligence. After all, it was his responsibility to protect them. He claimed that someone might have drugged him during one of his infamous parties, giving them the opportunity to copy his keys. But this explanation raised more questions than answers. Was Vickers careless with his duty? Or was he deliberately undermined by someone within Dublin Castle? The idea of an inside job quickly gained traction. The thieves had managed to bypass patrolling officers, navigate the castle's interior undetected, and access the strongbox without forcing it open. The case soon became a media sensation. Newspapers speculated wildly and theories proliferated. Even Scotland Yard, called in to assist with the investigation, initially believed that the jewels might simply have been mislaid rather than stolen. This assumption quickly fell apart as the facts came to light, but the lack of immediate leads frustrated investigators. Imagine the pressure Vickers must have felt, not just to recover the jewels, but to clear his name in the face of mounting public scrutiny. Would you trust a system that seemed more focused on blaming you than finding the truth? As the investigation stalled, attention turned to the wider circle of suspects. One name that repeatedly surfaced was Francis Shackleton, a high society figure and the younger brother of famed Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton. Francis worked in Vickers' office and had easy access to the jewels. He was also known to have financial troubles, providing a possible motive for the theft. But Shackleton wasn't in Dublin when the jewels were discovered missing, and no concrete evidence ever tied him to the crime. Despite Vickers publicly accusing Shackleton of the theft, authorities never formally charged him. This brings us to one of the most intriguing aspects of the case: how power and privilege influenced the investigation. Shackleton, a well-connected figure, seemed to evade scrutiny, while Vickers, whose reputation had already been tarnished, bore the brunt of the blame. What does this tell us about how justice is pursued or avoided when influential figures are involved? The case took another bizarre turn when spiritualists offered their help. Conducting seances, they claimed the jewels were hidden in a cemetery near Dublin Castle. Authorities followed the lead but found nothing. The spiritualists' involvement underscores how, even in the early 20th century, the public was willing to turn to unconventional methods when conventional investigations failed. Why do we as humans cling to unlikely explanations when we're desperate for answers? Is it because the unknown is more unsettling than the improbable? Despite a formal viceregal commission in 1908, the investigation yielded no breakthroughs. The commission blamed Vickers for negligence but failed to identify the thief or recover the jewels. Vickers was dismissed from his position, his career and reputation in ruins. But the theories didn't stop. Some speculated that the theft was politically motivated. With Ireland's nationalist movement gaining momentum, the possibility of home rule, self-government for Ireland, was becoming a contentious issue. Could the theft have been an anti-colonial act, a symbolic blow against British authority? Now that we've unpacked the audacious theft of Ireland's crown jewels, let's go beyond the jewels themselves and explore what their disappearance reveals about power, identity, and the tension-filled political backdrop of early 20th century Ireland. Why does this story endure? Why, more than a century later, are we still captivated by the case of the missing crown jewel? The answer lies not just in the dazzling gemstones, but in what they represented and in the drama that unfolded in their wake. To understand the deeper significance of the jewels, we need to look at what they symbolized. These weren't just decorative ornaments, they were emblems of the Order of St. Patrick, a chivalric order established by British King George III in 1783. The order was an attempt to reinforce British authority in Ireland by creating a sense of shared tradition between Ireland's Anglo-Irish elite and the British monarchy. Think about that for a moment. The jewels weren't just material treasures, they were political tools. They were designed to project power, unity, and prestige, but also control. For the Irish nationalists of the time, who were increasingly pushing for home rule and independence from Britain, these jewels might have represented something entirely different, a reminder of colonial dominance. Others floated even more absurd theories, such as the idea that the British government itself orchestrated the heist to undermine Irish nationalism. While these theories lack evidence, they highlight how political tensions in Ireland at the time shaped public perceptions of the case. Let's pause here and consider, how much do our own biases influence the way we interpret events? Do we by now the jewels were likely far beyond recovery? Experts believe they were broken apart and sold off in pieces, their unique designs melted down and their gemstones repurposed. Some even suggest that pieces of the jewels could be sitting unnoticed in modern jewelry collections. And yet, the fascination with this case endures. Why? Because it's not just about the jewels. It's about the unanswered questions, the what-ifs, and the human drama that surrounds the mystery. Now consider this. If you were living in Ireland at the time and you heard about the theft, how would you feel? Would you see it as a disgraceful crime, or would you interpret it as a symbolic act of defiance? As the investigation dragged on, the case began to reflect the broader societal divisions of the time. Ireland in 1907 was a deeply polarized place. On one side, you had the British administration and the Anglo-Irish aristocracy, who held positions of power and privilege. On the other, you had the growing nationalist movement, fueled by centuries of resentment over British rule. The missing jewels became a sort of Rorschach test. To British loyalists, their disappearance was a national embarrassment, a glaring failure of the very system that was supposed to uphold order. To Irish nationalists, it was harder to ignore the poetic justice, a colonial symbol stolen from the colonial stronghold. It's worth asking, how much do symbols like these matter in shaping our sense of identity and belonging? When something like the crown jewels disappears, does it take a piece of history, power, or legitimacy with it? One of the most intriguing aspects of this case is how it exposes the fragility of power. Dublin Castle was supposed to be impenetrable, a fortress representing British strength in Ireland. And yet the theft revealed vulnerabilities not just in its security but in the very system it represented. The suspicion that the theft was an inside job struck at the heart of this fragility. If Dublin Castle's own staff couldn't be trusted, what did that say about the broader system of British rule in Ireland? Consider the case of Francis Shackleton, whom Sir Arthur Vickers accused of orchestrating the theft. Shackleton, with his connections to high society and his reputation for extravagance, seemed an unlikely thief. But if he were involved, it would mean that someone deeply embedded in the system had betrayed it. The possibility of betrayal from within is a theme that resonates far beyond this case. It raises a question we should all reflect on. How do we respond when the institutions we trust fail us? Then there's the political dimension of the mystery. King Edward VII himself reportedly wondered if Irish nationalists were behind the heist. Though there's no direct evidence to support this theory, it's not hard to see why it gained traction. By 1907, the movement for home rule was gaining momentum, and Ireland was on the cusp of major political and social upheaval. The theft of the crown jewels could be seen as an early act of rebellion, a symbolic strike against British authority. It's the kind of act that, if true, would have sent shockwaves through both Ireland and Britain. But let's ask ourselves, would the theft of a few jewels really have changed the course of history? Or is it the story, the mystery, the intrigue, the unanswered questions that has kept this case alive in our collective imagination? Is that how we might view this case? Could the theft of a few jewels really have changed the course of history? Or is it the story, the mystery, the intrigue, the unanswered questions that has kept this case alive in our collective imagination? As time passed and the jewels remained missing, the case became less about solving the crime and more about assigning blame. Sir Arthur Vickers, dismissed and disgraced, spent the rest of his life trying to clear his name. In 1921, during the Irish War of Independence, Vickers was assassinated by the IRA, who claimed he was a British spy. His death added another layer of complexity to an already tangled story. Did Vickers take the truth to his grave? Or was he, as he insisted until the end, an innocent man caught in the crossfire of political and personal intrigue? And what of Francis Shackleton? Though he was never charged in connection with the theft, his reputation never fully recovered. He later served time for unrelated financial fraud, cementing his place as one of the case's most enigmatic figures. And in that sense, it's fascinating, isn't it, how a single event, the theft of the crown jewels, can ripple outward, shaping the lives of those involved in ways they could never have anticipated. But the jewels themselves? They've never been found. Most experts believe they were dismantled, their gemstones sold off and their settings melted down. If that's true, the physical artifacts are gone forever, leaving behind only the story and the questions. What does it mean for a mystery like this to remain unsolved? Does it frustrate us, or does it fuel our curiosity? And why are we so drawn to stories that resist resolution? When we think about mysteries like this, it's tempting to focus on the crime itself. Who did it? How did they do it? Where are the jewels now? But what if the real story isn't about the answers we don't have, but about why we keep asking the questions? The missing Irish crown jewels have become a kind of cultural artifact in their own right, not as physical objects, but as symbols. They represent Ireland's colonial past, the tensions of early 20th century politics, and the fragile nature of power. But more than that, they tap into something universal, our love of a good mystery. Why are we so drawn to stories that defy resolution? Is it because they challenge our need for order, our desire to believe that every question has an answer? Or is it because, deep down, we understand that some mysteries are more powerful when they remain unsolved? Let's consider the legacy of the theft itself. In the years following the crime, Ireland underwent seismic changes. The push for home rule gave way to the Easter Rising of 1916, the Irish War of Independence, and eventually the partition of Ireland in 1921. Against this backdrop, the crown jewels became less a symbol of colonial power and more a relic of a bygone era. But the story didn't fade. If anything, the mystery grew larger as time passed. Theories multiplied, from the plausible to the fantastical. Some claimed the jewels were hidden in plain sight, while others speculated they were smuggled out of Ireland entirely. Each new theory added another layer to the narrative, ensuring that the case stayed alive in the public imagination. Think about that for a moment. How many mysteries from the early 20th century still capture our attention today? What is it about this story that keeps it relevant even as the world around it has changed so dramatically? One reason may be the personalities involved. Sir Arthur Vickers, Francis Shackleton, and even King Edward VII were larger-than-life figures, each with their own motives, flaws, and secrets. Their stories remind us that behind every great mystery are human beings, complex, fallible, and endlessly fascinating. But it's not just about the individuals. The case of the missing crown jewels also speaks to larger themes that resonate across time. It's a story about power and its limits, about trust and betrayal, and about how symbols, whether they're jewels, crowns, or castles, can hold meanings far beyond their physical form. Let me ask you this. When you think about the crown jewels, what do you see? Is it the glittering diamonds and emeralds, or is it the web of intrigue that surrounds them? And if the jewels were found tomorrow, would the answers satisfy us, or would they only raise more questions? Theories about the fate of the jewels continue to emerge. Some suggest they were dismantled and sold off piece by piece, their gemstones scattered across the world. Others believe they were hidden away, waiting to be discovered. There's even a theory that they were deliberately destroyed to erase their connection to British rule. But perhaps the most compelling possibility is that we'll never know the truth. The jewels, like so many treasures throughout history, may be lost forever. And maybe that's not such a bad thing. After all, the mystery itself has become a kind of treasure, one that we can keep revisiting, reinterpreting, and reimagining. So, what does this mean for us? Why should we care about a theft that happened over a century ago? The story of the missing crown jewels reminds us that some questions don't have easy answers, and that's okay. It challenges us to live with uncertainty, to embrace the unknown, and to find meaning in the journey rather than the destination. In a way, this mystery is a reflection of life itself. We're always searching for answers, trying to make sense of the world around us. But sometimes the questions are more important than the answers. Sometimes the search is what matters most. As we wrap up this journey, let me leave you with one final question. What mysteries in your own life remain unsolved? And how might your perspective change if you embraced them, not as problems to be solved, but as stories to be explored? The case of Ireland's missing crown jewels may never be resolved, but its legacy endures. In the questions it raises, the stories it inspires, and the way it invites us to think more deeply about history, power, and the nature of mystery itself. If this story fascinated you, share it with someone who loves a good mystery. Let's keep the conversation going, because who knows, maybe the answer is out there, waiting for one of us to find it. Or maybe the real treasure is the story itself.